You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Leonard. I'm with NACS, and here we talk about things that matter to convenience stores. If they matter to convenience stores, they matter to our customers because we get about 160 million customers every single day.
And I'm Carolyn Schneer, also with NACS, the International Trade Association, and we represent over 50 members in over 50 countries.
And we have about 60 or 70 different countries that listen to our podcast. So we're called Convenience Matters, but maybe today we should call ourselves Global Matters because we are talking to Frank Gleeson, who is the NACS Vice Chairman of International, and he's also COO, I'm sorry, I gave you a promotion, COO of Aramark Northern Europe. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, great to see you guys. How are things?
Very good, thank you. And one of the things when we talk about global, NACS has invested heavily into global over the last decade. We've spent money rebranding even to go from National Association of Convenience Stores to NACS to reference that we are much more heavily invested into global. We have global conferences. We have global speakers. We have global representation on our board because we believe that much in the future of global. And we're going to talk to Frank about what he feels as the future of global.
So Jeff, I think you're totally right. I mean, I've been involved in NACS now for, it'll be almost 20 years soon. And what I've noticed over the last time that I've been involved, that the world is becoming much more of a global place. You know, we're seeing the same trends no matter where we go, to Japan, to Europe, to USA. And really, if you're out there in that global market, it's just a matter of time before something that's happening out there comes to a market near you that you've either got to win at or lose at. And that's where NACS comes in. I think it can give you that connectivity and the timeline, or certainly the innovation and the viewpoint that if you want to be successful, well, you got to do it well.
Frank, I've had the pleasure of coming over to visit you both in Ireland and in the UK. And I think along with a lot of the other retailers from the United States, we come over there because we can see some really great, as you said, the trends and the markets around there. I mean, you guys hit it out of the park with food service operations and the stores and the designs. And you have a lot more foot traffic in European convenience stores. So what's the benefit to a retailer to not only leave our country walls in the United States, but going abroad? And
we don't have walls yet.
We don't have walls, you're right. And getting outside and learning more from our global partners.
Yeah, I think you're so right there, Carolyn. I mean, if you take the European market, and I thought maybe specifically about the UK and Ireland, there've certainly been pockets of innovation and growth. I think it's interesting. You've seen the emergence of regional players, you know, people like Apple Green and Topaz and Eurogarages, who have completely reformatted what you might expect from a gas station or a fuel station with a small convenience store. And in fact, these stores have become mini food courts in a lot of cases, whereby there's a large variety of food to go, food to take home, a high level of convenience, and, you know, they've been really heavily invested in. So what you're seeing is a very, very well-developed and vibrant market whereby it's not just one player, but all players have stepped up to become excellent at what they do, and as a result of which their marketplace has grown considerably and is very strong versus, you know, where people might shop otherwise. So they really compete in food service, they really compete in convenience, and, you know, they don't let the supermarkets take all that business. They actually have become relevant to their consumers, all of whom are looking for, give me solutions because my hard-pressed time, give me experiences or things that I want now, and make it easy for me to do business with you.
Now, Aramark is an enormous company. You have all kinds of different retail formats. You have a food court, a massive food court. You're in hospitals. You're in colleges. You're in many different countries. So what do you bring back to Aramark from your NACS involvement? What do they get out of knowing what NACS knows?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When I look at the Aramark business, right, you know, we would be experts in food. There's no doubt about that. And as the demand for that grows within the gas and convenience space, you know, our operational excellence and our knowledge of trends globally and locally really bring a lot to the party. And, you know, we find that through our partnerships with franchises, we're able to put together a collection of what is right for the consumer. And, when I look at the Irish market in particular, or the UK market where we've got strong market presence, we see it as growth, opportunities to grow outside our core. So, we recently entered in a partnership with Maxwell whereby we're operating 2 service stations for them. It's a large format food court as part of that, and very like what you'd see with the Eurogarages format where they do company ops. But broadly speaking, I think, Jeff, Carolyn, what we see is a redefining of the customer experience. It's really bringing the food to the customer when they're on the go or where they live locally, making it easy for them when they come in, the predictability around the quality that you might want to see. It's really moved the bar up considerably, very much like what you see in pockets in the US. So when I first wanted to learn about about convenience and food, the US was really tops, and you've got pockets of it, particularly in places like Pennsylvania, where I don't see too many guys doing it better than the likes of Sheetz and Wawa. What we tried to do in my Statoil and Topaz days was emulate what they do, become famous for food and coffee, and then really grow that out. What we didn't expect was that the competitors would do the same. So you continually have to get better. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to reinvent yourself all of the time.
And one of the things when you talk about fresh food, and you had mentioned some of the companies in Pennsylvania, and you do see, and of course they're in multi-states, but we don't see it necessarily to the same level that people might see it in London or in Dublin or in other areas. What is the secret that makes it work in those areas? Is it that it's just much more dense? Is there distribution that can be overcome? What are some of or is it just a different customer? Why is food a little bit more advanced uniformly over in Europe than it is in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about the mega trends. So the mega trends we're seeing for sure is the healthy agenda. And I think everybody, and I mean from the workplaces to the education, i.e. in schools, we see millennials in particular and the Generation Z coming after them, they are going to be more interested in healthy food. There's no doubt about that. We're seeing that trend. And, there's a proliferation of new concepts being developed and coming to the marketplace all of the time. The second thing, what I see is, probably, people willing to experiment in food. So they're trying new types of food. So they won't stay with their traditional hot dogs and burgers or snacks. They're looking for new food experiences. And, even trends like healthy Asian food where, there's no MSG in it and it's much more fresh and the ingredients are really terrific in terms of taste profile. That's coming through as a mega trend. Now, what happens for the marketplace is you've got to be able to deliver that. So, number one, you've got to have strong supply chain. So you mentioned supply chain. So that's a critical element. The second thing then is you've got to actually have the operational expertise to be able to do it, either by operating a recognized franchise or by actually developing that expertise yourself. So if you can get the combination of those two things to support what is a mega trend, you've become very relevant and very important to the consumer group. And what happens is you get more business. And, the more business you get, the more you can invest. The more you can invest, the stronger your business gets. So it's kind of like a circle of growth. And that's really what I see. Mega trends translated into operational excellence. In UK, Ireland, same as you say in Japan, supply chains highly evolved, highly consolidated, and you find that you're able to get the availability of the fresh produce and you're able to get it in a very efficient way into your locations, and then really it's up to you.
So Frank, I like the way you phrase circle of growth, because one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking about the consumer segments, the millennials and experiencing food is some of the, and we've been talking about it here in the U.S., is some of these millennials are very soon, within the next, half generation or so, going to become the parents of these next generation of children. So if you can get them early, and in the last 5 or 6 years, they're going to be parents soon, and they're going to have influence over their children's eating habits and their children's and their children's. But so that circle of growth, I think, applies to the consumer as well.
Totally agree with that, Carolyn. I think the key for us is that it's a virtuous circle. It's continually evolving. I think the trends as they come through become habits. Right, when they become habits, they become sustainable. And then you're into the new trends coming. What's next? And we've got to continually look on a global scale. So we do this for a number of reasons, because the more we learn, the better we can adapt. The more we can adapt, the stronger and fitter we'll be. So it's evolution of the best. You got to be out there grabbing all those ideas from the marketplace and then delivering them for your customers, right? So it can never stop. And I firmly believe in having young people in your organization. So when we're hiring people, we hire the youngest, brightest people we can find. We put them in the influential jobs, make them part of our work groups, particularly on the marketing and any of those folks that are kind of tuned into what the future trends might be. We then go out and we listen. So the beauty about the Aramark business in Europe and Ireland in particular, we are in the universities and we are in the secondary schools. So I can try out these new things, establish them, and then bring them into the workplace. And as the millennials come through into the workplace, we're relevant. So we tend to get more of that business. And then fundamentally, as they move into leadership positions, they tend to favour your company if you're the innovation company. So I'd like to think of us here in Ireland as an innovation company. I'd like to think of us as coming up with new solutions, primarily to hit those consumer demands both now and into the future.
Well, Frank, I'm really glad you mentioned employees and jobs and labor and the issues that we face in the U.S. It was best said by somebody. We do our regular surveys where we ask retailers about various concerns once a quarter. And one of these lines I stole is one of our retailers said that the labor pool has become a puddle. Most of the people who want jobs have them. It's difficult, very difficult now to find and attract enough people and keep them engaged in the organization. We need to tell our story about why we are good jobs, why we are good starter jobs. And that's something that we're working on at NACS. Have you seen some of those same issues in Europe and other ways that you've looked at to overcome them and maybe outside of Europe? How do we look at the whole issue of employees?
Yeah, I'll kind of give you two views on that, Jeff, and maybe they're kind of slightly different perspectives. So perspective one is, I provide food solutions to the workplace. So we know that food is an emotional purchase. We know that if you can keep your employees on location and satisfied, that productivity will be higher. So it's a very high in the kind of decision point for younger people that the experience in the workplace in terms of food and beverage is right, and that they, especially with the diversity that we're seeing with health and also different nationalities and different ethnic groups. So just park that for a minute. Then we're into, our industry, so the hospitality industry or the convenience industry that we operate, where we're in some cases a minimum wage employer. We're an entry-level job. So what I think employers need to think about in our space is, how do you become the place that people want to work, or a great place to work? So can you train people? Can you give them rewarding work? Can you provide a career path for them? Can you give them skills that they can replicate or use elsewhere? And the answer is yes. We also are a very flexible employer, so we give different hours. People can work part-time, full-time. So we have a lot to offer, but fundamentally, I think the most important thing in both segments, so the people that I provide service to in terms of business dining, but more importantly our own business, you got to have a real good culture, and a culture where people are allowed to enjoy and be a great place to work, where coming to work is not like chopping stone, it's more like building a cathedral, even if it is just a sandwich maker or a barista, where, you can still enjoy that job and you can still interact with customers and develop social skills and, develop lots of different things that might be, you could use somewhere else. So I firmly believe our industry is a great industry. It's a great entry-level job for kids in college. They get to learn social skills. They get to learn about business. They get to learn about customers. They get to learn about productivity. They get to learn about process. All of that they can bring with them to their jobs in whatever field they go into. And particularly if they work in a fast-paced environment like ours, where, productivity and peaks that we experience during breakfast and lunch, you get to learn how to work fast. So that's a really good thing from a work ethic perspective.
So, Frank, as Jeff mentioned earlier, we have a really strong listenership outside of the United States. So those NACS, those people out there, what would they get if they went to, say, the NACS show? We have that every October, and I know you've been coming for as long as I've known you. What's something that would attract those people to join us, to come to NACS, to come to our events, or what would they learn?
Yeah, I think I'd broaden it slightly, Carolyn. So NACS show is just one element of what NACS does for the global community. So if you take the show itself, it's probably the largest collection of food and beverage products that you'll see anywhere in the world. So from an exposition perspective and walking the floor to learn about the products of the future, be it food products or new innovations around drink products or just new innovations around any kind of technology might help you run your business, you won't find a better place to find it all in one place. The second stream that I talk about quite a lot would be you get to network and learn best practice. So whether it's the seminars or the actual education sessions, and then the ability to have a Q&A session with some really smart people or network with some like-minded people, that's quite powerful. And it's really powerful if you're trying to develop and grow and understand your business so that you're more relevant for the future. So two very, very, very big things from a global perspective. The advocacy thing, which NACS does a lot of, is less relevant globally and more relevant in the US. So I'd say it's about seeing the product trends and the solutions, and then it's educating yourself through networking and seeing some of those best practice sessions that are available to you at the NACS show in that week. Very, very good use of time if you're a senior person, because you get to do it all in 2-3 days, and you get to really do it outside of your own environment in your own country, where typically we wouldn't take the time out. So I would strongly advocate it, and I've been going for years. I rarely would miss a year because I think there's something new to be learned every single time I go. I then would stretch it out, Carolyn, that, we've more than that. We've got the Global Forum and we've got, Convenience Summit Europe, which are two terrific events and aimed specifically at the global audience, where you're going to meet senior executives, you're going to see markets that are developing or relevant. The one in London, which has been going for many years now, is a very strong event. It's London and Zurich this year in June. You see the same guys coming every year, and you see a lot of new faces because our industry is changing and very dynamic, and everybody gets something. I mean, it's one of the highest rated events that we have in our calendar, and it's important. It's important for all those global guys out there that might be listening to us tonight. If you want to stay relevant and you want to be profitable and you want to grow, you got to come to these events, otherwise you're going to miss out.
And we get outside, especially in Zurich. We get, in London for that matter, get out on store tours, get to see, like you said, experience what's around you and just get some new ideas, more so than you'd even see on a slide projector. But you're like touching it, you're involved, you're meeting the retailers, the ones on the ground that are doing that in these countries.
And Frank, by the way, the check's in the mail. But I want to end on just focusing on, as we talked about rebranding, one of the things that we are doing with Refresh is we're really focusing on the idea of community and choice as the two things that we feel we can push forward on Refresh. How do we tell our story around nutrition? How do we tell our story around community? And then I look at the Aramark website and I see that your company's mission is to enrich and nourish lives every day. And enrich and nourish, there's community and there's food. And you have it right there. You have it here. That's really, I think, the story that we can best tell to policymakers, to customers, to suppliers, where we fit in as a global industry. We enrich and we nourish consumers.
No, spot on, Jeff. I mean, I think that's the mission, and it's the mission in Aramark, but it is what we do in the industry, right? Effectively, we provide convenience, products, services to make our customers' lives better. Now, we as an industry want to drive forward the fresh agenda. We want to be local with our communities because we do employ a lot of people in those communities. We provide services for them, and most of our industry is small independent operators, many of whom are quite diversified in terms of where they are and what they do. So I think our industry is an integral part, and it's an important part because, for some people we are the link to the community. We are the first starter job. We are the place where they can get their milk or their products that they need. Ideally, the thought leaders in our industry are trying to drive on, healthy and give choice. And I think that's important too. What you'll find is when the bigger, more sophisticated operators do it, you find the industry will go that direction, and that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing, much more fresh produce. I think everybody in our industry would like to sell more of it, but, really it's about customers coming in and believing in us and buying into that whole proposition that, local matters, and so does community, where, effectively, and I'll say this again, and it's probably true in the US, but in Ireland in particular, where I live, right, 80%, right, of our industry are single entrepreneurs. Guys that get up in the morning and open their stores and, try and provide a service to community. The money they generate goes back into the community and wages and, the jobs that they provide, and then the investment they make as they try and grow their business from 1 store to 2 stores, 10 stores, 100 stores. And there's many examples in our industry of people starting with 1 and getting bigger.
And Frank, I'll put you on the spot for one final question. We have talked in the past about how next 5 years, next 10 years, this trend is coming from Europe. Is there a trend, and those timeframes have condensed now, is there a trend that you see that has gained traction in Europe and will be no doubt successful in the U.S. that U.S. retailers might want to notice right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think what I'm seeing here, right, and I'm talking about UK, Ireland primarily, is the more progressive convenience food gas retailers are actually taking a lot of high street concepts and putting them in under one box, right? So what you might find would be they'll have 2 or 3 well-known branded franchises. They might have 2 new and upcoming franchises, and then they might have a couple of their own proprietary concept offers, all of which cover different day parts and cover different eating or types of food occasions. That's a big, big trend, and I'm seeing that with, as I said, Maxall, Apple Green, Euro garages, and they're quite powerhouse in terms of the growth in this marketplace. And what they're doing is they're actually maximizing that asset that the oil companies used to operate and put one thing on and putting 5 or 6 things on, so that the occasion becomes a multiple repeat occasion for the consumer across many different types of shopping missions, as we call them. Coffee would be a bedrock of that. So, you were seeing a bit more of the branded coffee being very, very sophisticated, gone from fresh brew to actually barista coffee is the big trend over here. So I see that continuing, and I see it possibly going to the US and global. I do know some of the guys tried it before, but I think it was the oil companies trying it without the operational excellence and without the innovation to go with it was probably the trend that didn't stick. And I would probably see that trend emerging out of Europe and growing out as these local regional players want to grow outside of their home markets. And we already know Apple Green are trying some things in the US. I think they're going to go there and do what they do here. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Euro Garages group have aspirations outside of Europe in time, much like Couche-Tard, right, has grown across into Europe. So it's going to be very interesting.
And it's just going to get more competitive. Thank you very much, Frank. As you pointed out, local matters. We heard today global matters. And thank you for listening to
Convenience Matters.
You've been listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. For more information, go to nacsonline.com.